Hi, I'm Vanessa, and on this channel, we talk about books and old stories and folklore and the deeper meanings that they have to teach us. I'm so glad you're here. So, I, like you, or a lot of people right now, are reading Wuthering Heights. I'm rereading it, actually. I first read the book when I was in high school. And because this isn't a novel that is very approachable to a young reader or a new readers to classic literature. I can't say that I took a lot from it, but I did give it a good try back then. And I think what I really remember about it is actually loving Heathcliff because I have always been a sucker for a Byronic hero, those literary bad guys. And I just loved the obsessive nature of love in this novel when I was young. And then flash forward to 2013, which is the last time that I read Wuthering Heights. And I had just graduated the year before with my degree in literature and it read totally different to me. Though I still love the complexity and the compelling narrative of this book, I can't say that I liked, definitely not loved, but did not like the characters at all. And so I rereading it again, and I'm not very far through this reread, but I wanted to do a video on some tips that I would suggest to a reader who has never read Wuthering Heights. This is not a book that I would go to as a very first classic read because it's challenging. It's beautiful. I think Emily Brontë was a genius. I think she was incredibly talented, and I think it's one of the greatest shames in literature that we didn't get more of her writing. But it's not as approachable as, let's say, Jane Eyre from Charlotte Brontë. So I wouldn't begin with this one, but I will do a video on the books that I would recommend going toward first if you're new to reading literature, because I want to make sure that you're getting a good experience and going to have a very good experience, a memorable experience that's pleasant when you first start reading classics, because sometimes they're challenging. And the way that this story is told is almost like through hearsay. So you get some observation from Lockwood, you get some gossip from Miss Dean, and you don't get a lot of firsthand accounts. You get bits and pieces, and there's all this unreliable narration of the story. So I would say that the first thing I would tell you if you want to read this book is not to expect the characters to be likable, especially if you're an adult. So if you are someone outside of your 20s, I would say that it's probably going to be a lot more challenging to find these characters really likable because with age comes wisdom, hopefully. You're going to find that that kind of obsessive love is really scary. When you're young, it's intense and it feels great. It makes you feel alive. But when you get older, you have heard and seen and possibly even experienced for yourself situations where that have become dangerous because of over intensified emotions. So, yeah, don't expect to like the characters. I wouldn't expect to love the characters. In fact, I would not read this as a love story. This is a warning. It is a tragedy. Also, you want to try to track the narratives very carefully. We're getting a lot of information from different sources in the book, from Lockwood to Nelly Dean. And so you want to kind of read like a detective to try to decipher who you're getting this from and are they reliable? Can you trust this person? You'll want to kind of decipher if Nellie is shaping the story, Miss Dean, or if Lockwood is putting his own judgments, which he often does, on the characters or the events themselves. You'll want to decipher what kind of misunderstandings could be happening between the people who are telling the story and how that story was perceived. An interesting thing to note is that the kind of layered storytelling is part of the psychological atmosphere, the intensity, the mystery of the novel. So though it can seem a little frustrating as we're reading it through, just keep that in mind that that's kind of the point. Another thing to pay attention to is the weather. You'll want to make sure you know when she's mentioning weather, what that is signaling in the story. The moors in the story are not just a backdrop, they are an emotional barometer. So when she mentions wind, snow, storms, cold, barren, the earth, they all mirror the inner states of the characters, so they are really signaling emotional atmosphere. When she describes weather, I would just slow down, and you can even highlight it or just make a mental note of it. but that is often signaling psychological turbulence, moral chaos, and spiritual unrest in the characters. Because the landscape is like this alive, untamed, wild thing, just like the love between Catherine and Heathcliff. Also, notice that there is a generational pattern, and it's not just one single love story, although a lot of the film adaptations do tend to stop with just Catherine and Heathcliff. I don't want to give away too much and I don't want to have a lot of spoilers, but I just want you to kind of think about this as you're reading. I believe that Bronte could be asking, can inherited trauma be healed? Also, you should read this as a work of Gothicism. There are ghosts and doubles and imprisonment and storms and revenge beyond death. There is a love that outlasts life. There's dreams. There's all sorts of spook in the book that is meant to make the story even more intense. This story is like a spiritual type of haunting. If you read it from a Gothic perspective, if you think of it from a ghost story that is maybe not in the traditional sense, I think you'll get a lot more from the book. One of the most important lines in the book is when Catherine says that I am Heathcliff. There is this merging of the two. They're claiming that they are a shared being, a dissolution of self. And that blurring of identity is intoxicating. It's central to the tragedy, though, and it explains why separation destroys them. So, the last thing I would mention is to resist the temptation to put modern moral judgment on these characters. It's tempting to read it through and try to pick out what is healthy and what is not healthy. And then even seeing it from a lens of feminism to patriarchy or the psychological diagnoses of possible things that these characters are experiencing. But I would suggest to try reading it like this. It's a myth of elemental passion. It is a study of pride and revenge and obsession. And it is a meditation on what happens when desire becomes worship. The novel is not asking, are they good people? It's asking what happens when the soul chooses intensity over peace, when it chooses obsession. So I hope this helps. A couple of other tips that I would suggest just when reading classics in general is take your time reading them. I read classics a lot slower than I do other books because they require a lot of thought and sometimes just sitting with it a little bit longer to see what it actually means. I also suggest having your favorite quotes and highlighting and even doing something as simple as like, taking a few notes, using some stickies. Um, Really work out your thoughts in the book and look things up if you find them to be challenging or if there are words you don't understand, there are passages you don't understand. Now, with all of the technology, it's pretty easy to kind of look things up. And I would just suggest that you do that because it's going to make reading more classics even easier because these books tend to build on themselves. And yeah, I think Wuthering Heights is definitely an accessible read for someone who has read classics before. Even if you haven't, though, and you want to try it, I'm definitely not going to discourage that at all. You do you, boo. Okay. But I really think that you might find it a bit challenging, but don't get frustrated. Don't give up. It's worth reading. It's a book that hangs with you for a long time. There's a reason why it has hung around for this long and has been this important to a lot of people. It's one of my favorite books, mostly because I just love Gothicism. And this book is all the things Gothic. So I hope that you enjoy the book. And if you have any other tips that you'd like to tell others about how to read this novel, please do leave them in the comments. I would love to read them. And of course, we're just sharing our own information here. So that's always helpful. Until next time, thanks for watching.